I'm going to follow up on my last video, the art that will, what did I call it? The art that will bankrupt your portfolio. And I had a very good comment by a YouTuber that follows me. I think he likes what I do, basically. And Goathorn, made a comment. I'm just gonna read parts of it, and I'm gonna follow up because I think it deserves an explanation. It's difficult to do a glib response on stuff that is a little bit more complex, and people that are actually creative people making art sometimes get offended, I think, by some of my statements. And I want to remind you that art is not a democracy. My art is not a democracy. It's not open for debate, especially if you have produced art of value. And this is something that usually is determined by supposedly critics that never have done it themselves. But I said, you can actually appreciate something without being a principal. But it's very suspect why most people miss it in their time. What is it that takes 50, 100 years, even longer for someone to determine whether some work of art, some contribution a person has made to our human spirit? This is what I reflect on, the spirit. It's not about progress. There is no such thing as progress in art. There is no such thing as a timeline or a linear progression in art. It has to do with infecting us with what I call spirit. The great art is not documenting the time. The great art is somehow able to conjure within the artist, within themselves, in spite of themselves quite often, are able to produce works of brilliance and value to humanity. Now, I'm just going to read this. I really like this comment, and I responded to Goathorn below with and I thought, well, it's not enough, and so I'll do a little follow-up. Not sure what point it is here, and the point being that I'm trashing this artist, Peter Doig. Actually, my intention wasn't so much to criticize Doig. Of course I did, but it's an art establishment. It's a way of the continuity of a mistaken worldview. It's like art has been hijacked. And I think the way it's been hijacked is that certain artists are promoted through history. And if you look at my comment under Goathorn, I list a bunch of artists that are totally irrelevant to our day-to-day lives compared to for somebody like, for example, Francisco Goya, who I love. I love this guy's work because he was so incredibly powerful in driving this nail into us. You know, it's like a spear into our heart. He's like killing us and reviving us with his art. And there are a lot of artists that were very competent and wealthy and well off that are totally forgotten now, or they were very good at what they were doing. They were wealthy. They were hobnobbing with the rich and the famous of the time, the kings and queens and noblemen. And Goya did too. Goya was the official court painter for quite a long period of time, and then he had to take off to France, and I think he died in the north of Spain. But my point is that it's not so much Doig, although Doig represents this flawed direction. This is something when I refer to Matisse as well, the idea that Matisse created a very, very thin surface. And now, in essence, there is, you can produce any thought, concept that you might have in whichever way is relevant to your art, to you personally. And Matisse was one of the front runners on putting very little on the surface and getting a lot out of it. That's how it felt to me anyway in art school, and later on too, the admiration, or let me put it this way, I felt Matisse was giving me permission to do something other than what had always been done before. But as a painting, just like Warhol, you look at those printed paintings, they're fluff, there's nothing there. But the concept is elegant and beautiful at the time. Now, why would I regurgitate something? Why would I regurgitate Matisse's? He did it. He already did it. And Doig is a kind of regurgitation of something that is accepted within an art community. There is nothing coming to the table that you can chew on. Doig is not giving us much to chew on. He may have some quirky idiosyncrasies, as I say it, that may have relevance to him and a few other people, but what is he presenting to us, and why is he so exalted. And he says himself, dude, he's kind of like stunned. And they all kind of sit around very stunned with each other when they have their successes, or they kind of babble on and babble with no real substance in their speech, in their words. When you hear most of these people that have been exalted as these great visionaries of our time. And I want to say that if you love a piece of creative work, whatever that may be, in my case, a painting or a sculpture, get it, buy it, enjoy it, put it on your wall, feel enthralled, feel inspired. I'm not criticizing that. I'm not saying people shouldn't do this art or should do this art. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about an establishment. You go to a museum now, they all look the same. They all have the same shit. How could that be? How could everybody have installations, photography, some sort of weird conglomeration of garbage put together that is all of a sudden, because it's so ridiculous, it becomes important, or paintings or objects that have been done many times over, especially through the Dada tradition. Marcel Duchamp, Kevin Blanche says Duchamp was the gatekeeper in New York when Guggenheim was establishing herself and her gallery. She used the advice of Duchamp. So what I'm trying to communicate, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from producing what it is they're doing. But what I'm criticizing is the direction that we're taking is wrong. And the fact that, I'll just read a little bit more of his great comment. Much of the art of the past, which does not necessarily have time period specific content, is still considered highly valuable. And I'm not, okay, time specific content. You know that art has always been supposedly ahead of itself, or it reflects the time. So time specific is a bit of an erroneous reflection here, because it's not about being time specific so much as being in the, representing something of the time that you're in, rather than 2 years before. You're never ahead. You're always 200 years before you are. It's time specific to the extent that we live in a time. And to miss the most incredible event in the history of all humankind, to me, says, well, something is kind of amok here. Something is wrong, especially from the people that are supposedly so intuitive and insightful. How can they miss this thing called Fukushima and the nuclear destruction we're facing, and not to have, like, they're all zipper lips? Like, you see, it's not, everybody doesn't have to do nuclear art, but when 0 in a million or more make no comment of this time specific becomes a big deal. It is time specific, but not from the point of view of me making art. I have a way of working. I have a vision that actually is all by itself. It's like me. It's like Ackerman. It's me. And then I choose subjects. And I've said that the subjects are somewhat irrelevant, because what I'm concentrating on is a delivery system, a way of working that I've tried to explain. And every good artist have their own way of working. And it may overlap with other artists, but this is very important. Every great artist had their way of working, their way of producing. The material that they used and the way they used that material was very specific to their work. You can identify a Cézanne, you can identify a Van Gogh, you can identify even people in the Baroque. If you look at Velázquez compared to Rivero, there is always something very specific to an artist. So the time-specific thing is important when you have a time-specific event that is so monumental as Fukushima. Let me read a bit more. There should be diversity in art, absolutely. I believe your work should be promoted more, not because of their monetary or aesthetic value. Absolutely. Monetary aesthetic value is of no, it's like Barnett Newman said, ornithology is to the bird what aesthetics is to the artist. So absolutely, and monetary is only relevant in terms of staying alive and making a living, and making a decent living, I guess. But that's, 1 in 100,000 artists. Like many are, but because of the period-specific I kind of screwed that sentence up. should be promoted not for monetary or aesthetic value like many are, but because of the period specific content. This was a criticism that only art specific to the period. Well, art has to be of the time. And, you know, if you look at Warhol or Pollock, it's of the time. And he made references, Pollock did, Warhol did, to the time, which is the work that they produce. So yeah, the time is absolutely crucial in terms of artists reflecting in their intuition and sensitivity what it is they're about. Let me call you back, okay?
All right, bye.
So, I hope I'm getting this clear for you. His Goathorn continues, I don't see what good it does to trash other artists because they are not doing anti-nuclear paintings. Isn't that a bit vain and unrealistic to expect? All right. Yes and no. And I'll tell you why it's not. Well, like I said before, if you are in the age of fission, as I've said, we are in the age of fission, and you're making work out of your little hovel in a cave somewhere, you're not connected to the rest of the world, you don't talk to any other human being or watch anything or hear radio or hear anything anybody else is saying, yeah, I mean, you know, it's unlikely you're going to produce work related to the age of fission because you've never heard of anything, and nuclear radiation is invisible, it doesn't smell, it doesn't taste like anything. So yeah, you could probably do that, but we're all connected. We're all connected. So it's curious that there isn't more within, I mean, it's only 4 years, but I always say we don't have time. Why is it that I get this? And the other guys are sitting back, the successful artists are sitting back and sipping their pina coladas, and they're not going to ruffle the feathers. That's what it really is all about. They're not going to ruffle anybody's feathers because they don't want to lose their stipend. So when I trash Doig, you say, what's the point of trashing an artist? You're absolutely right. There's no point in trashing an artist, but in the aggregate, in the sense that there is no artist, there is no work being produced within the museum system that addresses this as forcefully with artwork of originality. And I think here it's very important. It's not just a document. I don't give a shit about documenting the time. I'm concerned with spirit. And the idea of spirit is connected to what all of us are going through in some way. And I've said we all know what we're going through, right down to the amoeba in the ocean that's being destroyed by this radiation. I understand your criticism, though, of the art oligarchy, absolutely, for not at least including works such as yours. Fine. Or people that are on the level of my work. And quite frankly, I am not seeing the originality in my work that I've understood through my breakthrough. What I've talked about is will eventually come out. It will eventually come out because it's kind of like when you look at artists of superbness and elegance as you may see them even at this time, like somebody like Gerhard Richter, or somebody I like is Georg Baselitz, people of originality. Richter is suspect to me. He does have competence and ability, but he uses the system very well because the work he produces has been done many times before already, but he's done a variation of. So there are very few people that I think are actually bringing an original, making an original statement with what it is that they're doing on all levels, conceptually, physically, very important physically, because art ultimately is a physical object that you relate to. You look at it and you absorb something from it. So that's very important. So the oligarchy, you're absolutely right, Gohorn, that the oligarch, the systems of wealth and self-promotion and all of that is my basic criticism. This is who I attack. This is who I dislike. This is what we're up against. And it's not an easy choice to make art, to make paintings. The art schools are full. They're at the brim. They can't accept any more people because here at the art gallery, not the School of Art, the what's it called in Toronto? Anyway, I'll remember later. They produce thousands and thousands of art students every year that go and waiter, and their life expectancy as an artist is anywhere from 2 to 5 years tops. tops. So when you go to their art schools, you will be thrown out, and if you're lucky, you'll work in some field of design or maybe film industry, maybe, I don't know, advertising if you're lucky. But the point is that it's not for me to trash artists. That's not my interest, because there aren't very many suitable subjects. But Doig is a subject from the point of view that he even admitted, £7 million, that's $14 million for a work, and he's like stunned. He's looking, duh. He's like stunned, and he says, yeah, I was shocked. He was shocked. Obviously, he was shocked, because nobody in their right mind would say my work is worth $14 million relative to whatever else you can buy for that money. So he is a subject because I didn't pick on him. He was picked. They picked him. I didn't pick on him. They picked him. So I look at it and say, this work is worthless. In the scheme of things, not just time specific, but it's worthless from the point of view, if you look at artists, contemporary artists of Goya, most of them are totally forgotten. And I believe that this Doig guy will be totally forgotten. It'll have no significance. Now, if he had introduced the time reference in his work, which is one of the things is nuclear. Actually, it's the most important thing. I mean, there are many time references you can go. The Non-Patriot Act, all the destruction, the wealth destruction, the poverty, the chemical destruction, all the destruction going on. It's, as you hear, it's mostly destruction. There isn't very much positive to look for. But I still say that it's important to show to have some evidence of originality. Some evidence of originality. I don't see it in Doig's work. I don't see originality. It's a Matissean regurgitation. It's a kind of quirky subject matters pulled in with a Matissean regurgitation. Give me something to chew on. I have nothing to chew on. And I wish him a good life. But this postured and groomed art establishment will not give up its reins to somebody that is going to confront their vision, because they themselves always say, curators say, they have a vision. Curators have a vision. Give me a break. Curators have a vision. They just accumulate work, stick it on a wall, and hope for the best, and hope that nobody will ridicule them in the next 10 years. So, Goathorn, I loved your comment and challenging the idea that, oh, just because you don't do nuclear art doesn't mean you're not a good artist. I agree. I agree. You can have originality and a great deal of value to me, even if it's not on the nuclear subject. But I don't see it. I don't see it. And I don't see it in the context of popularization, popular art museums. I don't see it. I don't see it. And if I did see it, if I came across it, and I don't come across everything, but if I did see it, I appreciate like I say, there are artists that I really like Georg Baselitz, turning stuff upside down. He can reinvent the entire art history without ever repeating himself or repeating other people's work. So this has gotten a bit longer. Wow, it's a complex thing, especially when you're dealing with the creative forces in us and saying you can only do this or you can only do that. It's contrary. We want that diversity, like you say. We want to have people expressing themselves on every level. But in order for it to be important to me, you have to draw in the time. And the time we're in the age of fission. I've called it the age of fission. And we need to reflect in our work some aspect of even some kind of a recognition of this, whatever it might be, some recognition of this. And I think that'll make the work stand up over time. Even if your process or whatever it is you're doing is not original, it'll stand up. It'll stand up. That's what I think. So, yeah, people, creative people, start getting clued into the time we're in.